All right. I think we're good. We're good to go. Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Felipe Malicio. Welcome to the inaugural relaunch of the Basement Crawl podcast with Katie Roman. Katie, say hi to everybody on the Pop Culture Life.
Hi, everybody.
How you doing? Glad to be
Just
back.
ready to get this party started.
Yeah, me too. Glad to be back. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge all the new members who have made their way to our little group here. Thanks to the More Together Facebook campaign, we were able to reach a lot of folks who were looking for a Facebook group just like this. So thank you to Facebook and spotlighting us on the More Together campaign that they've been trying to encourage more people to find the groups that they're looking for. Also, a big shout out to my fellow admins. I guess I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Felipe Malicio. I'm an administrator here at the Pop Culture Life Group, along with Henry Maldonado, Vince Mercandetti, and the girl formerly known as Erin Zook. I don't know her real last name. I think it's Zuccarello, but they are my partners in crime. They helped me run this tight ship, and I couldn't ask for a better cast of characters to help me with this group. So some background on said group. This is a group that used to be known as For Reals. We eventually changed it to Pop Culture Life. But it just started out as a small, tiny group with all my friends, including Katie, who is an original member, just to be a place to talk about movies. Long story short, we expanded to discuss TV shows, comic books, video games, etc., etc. Eventually, we were picked up by the life groups. That includes the baseball life, the football life, all the lives in the world, and we are now the pop culture section. So we're here to entertain.
All the lives. This
is the Basement Crawl podcast. We are talking some pop culture entertainment subject matter here. Background on the podcast, this was originally launched out of xnsports.com. That was the website I was working for, and my editor-in-chief told me that I was more than welcome to do a pop culture podcast, so I did with Katie Roman over there, as you can see.
That's me.
And that was last spring. We kind of stopped doing, but we are back. That's why I call it a relaunch and not a premiere, because it's a relaunch, it's a rebrand, it's everything's
the grand
new.
reopening.
But not rerun, that's definitely for sure. And the purpose of this podcast is that Kitty and I are sharing things that we've experienced lately, that we witnessed, that we are listening to, we're watching, we're viewing, and then just based on that, come up with a theme for the show on every episode. So this week's episode is called The Brutality of Man, Men Worse Than Beasts. So every episode should have a different theme. And also the long-term goal is to find connections to all the episodes and put them, see if we can find a current pattern or a callback or something. But the goal is to connect every episode together in some weird way. So hopefully now that it seems like we're going to be regularly recording this, that we should be able to do this on a more consistent basis as well. Why Basement Crawl? Katie, you want to take this one over, or you want me to keep going?
Well, because nerds live in their parents' basement, which is where I'm proudly broadcasting from today. And if you'll notice behind me, I do have a lot of murder implements and some empty coffee filters for if you get tired murdering people, I guess. So we called it Basement Crawl for a few reasons. One, because nerds are stereotypically living in their parents' basement and complaining about pop culture things, as well as the fact the basement crawl part comes in from, we seem to always be talking about Zelda or Dungeons and Dragons or wrestling, and just having something that combined those things together seemed appropriate. So this is our Basement Crawl.
Yeah, dungeon crawl, basement crawl, like you said, those are the recurring themes. Like they're almost like running gags at this point. The other thing that we talk about a lot about is wrestling. Ironically enough, that's how I found out that Katie was a wrestling fan. So it all works out for us, don't it?
It really does. We're just that cool, I guess.
Except
sometimes when it comes to pop culture, we are literally the two worst people to talk about it ever.
Yeah, because we're nerds and we don't do anything that's popular, I guess. But moving on, we will touch on that a little bit later here. Let's see, what else do we have? Introduction to ourselves. like I said, I used to be a sports writer for xnsports.com. Before that, I was writing about movie reviews and music reviews and sports stuff at my blog, Pathological Hate, along with my buddy, Devon, who is a massive car head. I don't know what to refer to him, but he knows his cars. Like, he writes car reviews about any vehicle. He's not a gearhead, he's not a mechanic, but he'll tell you the difference between a Honda Civic and a Toyota Corolla, which is more than I can say about myself. Katie, why don't you go ahead and tell the people why you're so important to this program?
Because I'm awesome, that's why. I'm actually a novelist. I have 7 books out in the world. I have 2 that I'm planning to have come out as serials later this year. So that'll be fun. And is that my website?
Yeah.
He's screen sharing my website. I do a lot of mostly fantasy, though I do have some urban fantasy in there, werewolves eating tacos and whatnot. So if that's your jam, get on it. I also have a blog that I'll be getting back into it weekly. I kind of fell off. It's called Shady Pines Ma. And I am watching all of the Golden Girls episodes in order, and I am making sassy remarks about them because I love me, the Golden Girls, and everybody else should too. So if you want to laugh about 80s sitcoms, that blog is where you should be right now. Well, maybe not right now.
Yeah, do it later.
After this podcast, you can go there. Oh, and then my website, if you can't read that, it is katieromanbooks.com.
And thank you for sharing. Go check it out. It's kind of funny you say that. You write about fantasy novels. You write fantasy novels, and I deal with fantasy sports. So another reason why we're so damn compatible, right?
Yeah. That and the ties of corporate America, I guess.
Yeah, we're also ex-coworkers. So you know what? It was serendipitous that we both met, is what it is. So it was meant to be. Anyway, so this week's episode is the brutality of men worse than beasts. When I think about the podcast name, Basement Crawl, I can't help but think about Crawl Space. And when I think about Crawl Space, I can't help but think about John Wayne Gacy, who is notorious and infamous for burying his victims in his crawl space and decomposing their bodies with limestone. So no one, kind of like to mask the odor of rotting corpses and the like. So yeah, it doesn't get any more brutal than that, does it, Katie?
What was that? Your internet connection's terrible.
Yeah, I know. I said it doesn't get any more brutal than John Wayne Gacy, does it?
Oh, no. Well, I don't know. Jeffrey Dahmer.
Jeffrey Dahmer's another one, and it's tied into the fact that I just, my wife and I have been listening to the Serial Killers podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Which, this is why it's kind of fresh in my mind to talk about Jeffrey Dahmer and John Wayne Gacy. Because like I said, it's still fresh in my mind.
Gacy. Everybody's favorite clown.
Ugh. Interestingly enough, both from the Midwest, Gacy from Chicago, Dahmer from Milwaukee. At least that's where most of his killings occurred. So I don't know if there's something in the water in the Midwest that leads people, but I think it's more of their rough childhoods. Both of them had pretty rough, abusive childhoods, and that there's a psychological aspect of that led them to become the infamous men that they would become eventually, unfortunately enough. But the thing I like about the Serial Killers podcast is that not only do they talk about the acts of the murders, obviously that's gruesome subject matter to deal with, but I like the psychological aspect of it, where they explain each individual's infamous killer's childhood, and you get to see those connections that, oh man, like in their past, something affected them so negatively that their only way that they ended up coping with that aspect of their life is by, unfortunately, going on a murderous rampage. I mean, John Wayne Gacy himself would get beaten every day. So every time I have a new sense of appreciation when someone says, oh, well, that kid needs to be disciplined and taken in the shed and really get disciplined and beaten down. Well, Wayne Gacy was beaten up every single day by his father, and look how that turned out to be.
You know, I had heard once that, and I'd never be able to find the source, this is like 10 years ago, that I had read this, but that John Wayne Gacy was also, I don't know if he was a closeted gay man or if he was just a transvestite, but he would also get beaten because he would dress in his mother's clothes.
Yeah,
So he lived with a lot of repressed issues.
Both of them ended up being homosexuals. Not that there's a connotation between homosexuality and murderous rampages, but you got to remember the times that they were living in. Like Gacy in the 70s, I believe, Dahmer in the late 80s, early 90s, where homosexuality is still kind of not as open as it is. I mean, we just saw Kate McKinnon give Ellen DeGeneres a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Golden Globes. That stuff wasn't common in the 70s and 80s, so a lot of shame in what they were as people. And the result and the product of that was not justifying it, but it is what it is. They're the infamous men that we all know because they went on a killing spree. So there's the theme for today. Very, very, peppy subject matter.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to everybody.
Murder.
Hey, we're off to a roaring start, aren't we? There's wildfires in Australia. There's
got sad again.
There's airstrikes in Iran, and we're talking serial killers on this podcast because that is a theme that we decided to go with, was the brutality of man. Any other thoughts that you have on this subject matter?
No.
That's pretty brutal. I mean, the serial killer podcast is one where you needed to have a Stitcher premium account, and recently you can listen to it if you have a Spotify premium account. So that's why I've been able to catch up on some of these other episodes. And I always feel bad that, man, I shouldn't be giving these people this much attention. But I know that I'm not the only one who gives these people that type of attention. Even at my old job, I found about several of my ex-coworkers who were into true crime podcasts. And
so many people are in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say a lot of people are into that. Oh, I know at least 8 people off the top of my head who'd be like all over a serial killer podcast. So it's, I'm watching these guys make all these comments. So here's a fun story, because I see you guys talking about Jack the Ripper over there as a serial killer, which I believe he was classified as one. But here's a fun story. So before Jack the Ripper went about murdering all 5 of those prostitutes in Whitechapel, there was a guy in London, I forget his real name, he was called the London Monster, and he was a serial stabber, and he would go around and stab women in the ass with a penknife, or he'd hide it in a bouquet of flowers and say, "Will you smell this?" and stab them in the face. And then he would run giggling down the street. And it was so bad. This guy was so bad. Like, nobody died from this. He was literally just a dude that went and stabbed people. But they didn't die. It was like a tiny little penknife. But women would wear like iron butts so that it would deflect this guy's knife. So there's something fun you can go look at. They arrested a guy who they charged with the crime, but like 8 more stabbings happened during his trial that they're like, it probably wasn't him, but they're like, whatever, we caught the London Monster, it's fine, don't worry about it.
That's kind of like the Atlanta murderer too, which we have a lot to cover, so I'll finish the serial killer portion of the podcast right now before I go on another tangent. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that they were making iron butts. You heard of Iron Man? Iron butts.
The iron butts.
If Marvel Studios comes out with a movie franchise called Iron Butts, it would automatically make $300 million right off the bat. So good idea.
No
Katie.
Questions.
We should work for Disney. Moving on. So we go from serial killers to mobsters, mob killer, and because I just recently, over the holidays, I saw The Irishman, directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Joe Pesci, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, typical Martin Scorsese guys. So as you know, I'm in heaven watching this movie, but we got to talk a little bit about Frank. Oh, absolutely. Talking a little bit about.
I don't believe it.
Frank Sheeran, who was notorious for killing, I guess, for lack of a better term, fellow criminals. And that's the thing that made me wonder. So how come we scrutinize these serial killers as psychopaths or whatever, but when it comes to mob killers, we just kind of shrug our shoulders and move on. Like, yeah, is it just because it's criminals killing criminals? Is it that simple, Katie?
I don't think it's that simple. I think it has to do with more of there's a certain hierarchy when it comes to mob killings. And there's usually, it's not, you know, serial killers will have their own targets and people that they want, you know, specific, like it's men within this age or it's women who look like this or, you know, whatever the case may be. I think it's more political and financial gain to that. So their targets are more, it's not as, I guess, random as a serial killer. It's more organized because it's not ever just one dude. He's hired by someone who maybe hired them to find someone and up on down the line. And I think that comes more organized crime.
Yeah, hence the name, right?
Put it that way.
Hence the name. But Frank Sheeran, you know, this movie based on the autobiography, what's it called? I heard you paint houses. Get it? Because when you shoot a guy, the blood splatters all over the wall, and fresh new coat of red paint, right? So, hardy har. But you know, and the thing about where you kind of question why this guy, or you bring him into the whole theme, you know, men worse than beasts, is that this guy would kill associates, friends. I mean, he killed Jimmy Hoffa, which throughout the movie, as Frank Sheeran and Jimmy Hoffa's character would get closer and closer, eventually Frank Sheeran was the one who had to, at least in this interpretation of the story, because many people don't believe that he's the one who killed Jimmy Hoffa, but he's the one in his mind, he's the one who did it. Like, that's his friend. And it only took one order like that. Like, all right, well, job's got to get done. I got to do it. So there's something to be said about how brutal that is, that 1 minute you're hanging out with your best friend and the next minute you're already scheming on how you're going to kill the guy.
Yeah, and I know we were going to talk about this later, but I figure it ties in really well to what we're talking about with organized crime.
Sure.
The show Killing Eve, which I know you haven't watched yet, but it is also about a hired assassin. She works for, they're called the 12, and they're essentially an international crime syndicate we don't know a ton about on the show yet, but she's a sociopath. She kills, she doesn't care, she has no emotional connection except to Eve, who is this MI6 agent who is now getting in too deep and is kind of showing the same signs that this sociopath has been showing since season 1. It's awesome. And it shows that women can be just as brutal as men. He looks like he doesn't know what to say.
No, I got distracted. This is one of my biggest fears, was getting on Facebook Live and looking at the comments. And I was trying to comment on somebody, and my video on the Facebook Live feed automatically played. So whatever you said, I heard it twice. So
good.
Can you run back the last sentence, please?
I don't remember what the last sentence was.
Killing Eve.
That women can be just as brutal as men.
Yes, thank you.
That kind of murder, stabby way.
Yeah, it's not just boys fun here. It's we're an equal opportunity podcast. We recognize both men and women, infamous murderers as well. But no, I've been meaning to watch it. I know my wife wants to watch it. I know she's mentioned it before.
It's a good show.
Yeah.
It's I didn't know if I was gonna like it or not, but I was like hooked after one episode. It's great. And the assassin, her name is Villanelle, the actress that plays her, Jodie Comer, is amazing. Mm-hmm. She's got a great range, and I love it. She makes it awesome.
Sandra Oh's in it too.
Yeah, Sandra Oh is Eve.
Oh, okay.
And they got this weird, like, violent sexual tension that it's like, okay.
Well, aren't all tensions violent and sexual in nature?
Yes.
All right.
That is true.
So moving on from all of that, the other thing we were going to talk about today was the Star Wars. Yeah. My wife made me watch all 3 installments of this latest series. Is there a name for this latest trilogy? Is there like a name for these trilogies?
Yeah.
I'm not a
Yeah.
Star Wars fan. You are, so I might as well ask you these questions.
No, I think they're just all nine of them are just all nine of them are just now called the Skywalker saga. It's apparently what we've been told and what we have to go with from now on.
Interesting. Well, I watched the last three, and my wife was able to convince me to watch it because Oscar Isaac is in it, in the last three movies. And I'm a big Oscar Isaac fan ever since I watched Ex Machina. I believe that's the name of the movie. And for those who don't believe in representation in Hollywood, I mean, I'm a Latino. Oscar Isaac's a Latino. He's not even Mexican. He's from Guatemala. And
oh, is he really?
yeah,
I didn't know that.
And that was the selling point that my wife gave me to watch the movie. I'm like, all right, fine, I'll watch it, but I'm only watching for him. But yeah, so that was my way into these last three movies. But I enjoyed the last movie. But Katie, I ask you, how does this tie into our theme for today?
Palpatine, obviously.
Yeah.
Though you only see him because you haven't watched the other six, have you? You've only watched these three, right?
No, that's why I'm asking you these questions, man. Take it away.
Man, here's just this fucking guy hasn't seen the other six. So Palpatine, to give you a quick little rundown here in my rocking chair, like Norman Bates. Right. That's why I'm shaking, by the way. I'm in a rocking chair because why not? So the Sith are, see, the one thing about tying this into men are as brutal monsters is that Star Wars is very black and white. And you usually, when it comes to Palpatine, he's just evil. There's no like fall from grace. There's no like childhood abuse or anything like that drives him to it. He's just an evil dude. And, when it comes to Star Wars, genocide's a whole big thing, and he's real into that. So, that's pretty brutal. But I would say that Kylo Ren would probably tie in better to the other people we're talking about because he has the potential to be good. But throughout those three movies, we constantly see him doing the most dickish thing he can do. God, just the worst. And then in the end, the only thing that, okay, I'm going to throw out a spoiler warning here because, like, if you haven't seen it, you're not a Star Wars fan. No, I'm just kidding. The only thing that turns him away from the dark side is getting stabbed and almost dying.
Oh, that goes with our theme for today.
I called bullshit. Like, come on. That was it. Nothing else that's happened. Not like the endless opportunities your family has given you. No. Okay, whatever.
Watching the last movie, Rise of Skywalker, I couldn't help but see, what are the evil guys' names? Is it the Dark Side, Dark Order, New Dark?
They're called the Dark Side. They don't get called the Sith until the prequel trilogy. Oh. Then you kind of find out what they are, but even that is like George Lucas kind of went off the rails, and sometimes I don't think he knew what he was explaining. But in the original trilogy, it's just the dark side of the Force. Okay. And then in the prequels, we learned that people who practice the dark side are the Sith, but there's also dark Jedi. It's complicated in the fact that we don't have all day for me to explain all this to you, but essentially the dark side of the Force is it's supposed to be you're ruling with your emotions and you're doing things that benefit you. So there's a sort of selfishness that's associated with the dark side of the Force. When you're supposed to be selfish and compassionate, you're selfish and a douchebag, essentially.
You mentioned Emperor Palpatine. Well, I guess it wasn't him that was putting the order out, although I guess he kind of was. There's this scene in the last movie, The Rise of Skywalker, where they ordered to start blowing up planets. And as I'm watching this, for those who don't know, I was a sociology major in college and a history minor as well. So we talked a lot about, conflicts between nations. And I couldn't help but put that parallel down as, wow, that's no different than airstrikes being ordered on countries with no air defenses. So, and they actually put a close-up of the planet that was being blown up as to 1 minute it's just another typical relaxing out of the ordinary day, and the next minute everything you know is ceasing to exist right in front of you.
Yeah, and that happens in the first movie where like 4 planets are destroyed at once.
Okay.
And I'm like, I feel like I've seen this before. Alderaan 1 through 4 there. Okay, whatever. So yeah, no, there's a lot of genocide in Star Wars when you think about it. Like a lot. Like Alderaan's destroyed. Coruscant is destroyed. The Jedi are wiped out.
Jeez, man.
Tusken Raiders just obliterated. Just a lot of genocide when you think about it.
Right. I thought humanity was bad, but I think George Lucas might take the cake on this one. Or is he
George
really
Lucas.
just? Or is he just like being inspired by actual events? You know, like how what's that old saying go? Art imitates life, or life imitates art. Is it just really him, in a sneaky way, kind of reflecting on society in his own little way there? Wow, am I giving him too much credit?
Wouldn't give him that much credit. Don't get me wrong, I'm like a huge Star Wars nerd, but there's a lot of stuff I would not give George Lucas a whole lot of credit with.
Okay, sorry about that. So my first instinct was not to give him too much credit, but I thought, well, maybe I had this guy pegged wrong, but apparently he's just there to sell merchandise and movie sales. Okay, got it.
Oh my God. So I got Vince's comment here on Facebook is nobody is like, fuck Endor. I beg to differ because the Empire put people on that moon of Endor for a reason. They were there for a reason. They were like, fuck Endor, bitches. Wow. Teddy bear bitches. I'm swearing a lot. I apologize.
Oh, so they're from the planet Endor. I didn't know that. I didn't know the little teddy bears were from Endor. It makes so much sense now. Every Kevin Smith movie I've seen in the past 20 years is starting to make a little sense now.
See, you should just watch the original trilogy.
I'm good. I watched the first one.
I see.
What's it called? A New Hope?
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched that one.
Watched it?
Yeah, I was forced against my will to watch it, but I watched it anyway. We were at my friend's house, and they just decided, hey, let's put on Star Wars while we play this board game. I was concentrating on playing the board game, but that movie was playing in the background.
Star Wars. Shut your face, Star Wars.
Yeah.
I have read so many expanded universe books, it hurts my soul sometimes. So the Star Wars universe is brutal. It is full of like murder and genocide and just like full-scale war all the time.
Wow. Brutality of men indeed. Here I was thinking we were just going to talk about Kylo Ren, Emperor Palpatine, and you're telling me there's a whole Disney universe that it remains to be unlocked where it could fit into this episode alone, you're saying.
Yeah, I could go on forever, but we're not going to do that because you don't know anything. And, well,
I'm learning so much, though. I didn't know that there was so deliciously devious over here. That's pretty...
Oh, my God. It's, man, the dark side of the Force. I would definitely be a dark Jedi, I decided. Not because I am full of hate or anything, because I am so incredibly lazy. I would use the Force to get me the TV remote across the room, which is a selfish way to use the Force when I could be doing something better with it.
Oh, well, technically, that falls on the evil side of things, the dark side of things. If you're just using your powers for selfish reasons, Katie.
Yeah, well, whatever.
Well,
the remote is in my hand.
Oh my God! I just saw my wife post. Does that make George Lucas the most notorious serial killer of all time?
Would he be a serial killer, or would he be a dictator committing genocide?
That's what we're discussing. Politically driven killings. Does that make? I'm not gonna mention them by names because they don't deserve it. Even though the first two murderers that we mentioned do deserve mentions, but not these other people. So if you don't know your history, that's on you. But do certain German chancellors and certain Italian fascist dictators, are they considered serial killers? I mean, certain Russian authoritarian figures, are they considered serial killers?
No, I don't think they are. I think they're considered tyrannical dictators, which
Yeah,
falls into a different category.
yeah. Well, but they fit in this theme as well. Brutality of men.
They do. They
Uh,
do. That's
where
true.
do we get the idea for this episode? Katie brought up this TV show on Netflix called The Witcher, and I was reading the synopsis of the show, and their line, "Men worse than beasts," spoke to me, and that's where I go, oh, you know what? Let's go with that for this week. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to watch it. Katie, you tell me you're a big fan. Can you tell us what it's all about?
You know, I thought I was going to actually hate this show because I do not like the first game. It is a garbage game. I don't care what anyone says. It's just not good. So I went into this really skeptical that I was going to hate it and it was going to be a disgusting sexist mess. And I was pleasantly surprised, actually. So for those who don't know, witchers are essentially bounty hunters on steroids who they don't get sick. It's harder to poison them. They're super strong. They're sterile, but surprisingly virile for some reason, because why not, I guess. And it's about Geralt the Witcher. And it's also, you know, he's kind of like, I would say he's a lot like the man with no name in the Dollars trilogy, where he's going from place to place, being involved in other people's stories, but he himself, his story is kind of sidelined until later. And then it's mostly about a princess named Ciri, who's probably, I don't know, I think she's like 12 or 14 maybe.
And an Apple
And
device.
then a powerful sorceress, Yennefer, and they live in a very brutal world. And I have actually started playing the second game in the Witcher series, and you are put in a lot of moral dilemmas, and there are never any right choices, and humans are the fucking worst.
Okay.
It's all about neighbors killing neighbors.
Oh, kind of like The Irishman.
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of.
Sort of. Only there's more like targeted fantasy racism, because the racism is more about, oh, elves are the worst, let's kill them, kind of thing. And so it comes down to you, the Witcher is a neutral party essentially, who has to decide what course is the best morally, even though, you know what, sometimes there is no right course. So I would say the brutality of man, going back to that, the first episode, which I actually rewatched before we started to kind of have a few like fresh in my mind type things. The first episode is based off of a short story within the Witcher universe, I found out. There is a princess named Renfi. She was born during an eclipse. Everybody thinks she's cursed. And her stepmother wanted her killed because she saw her doing like sociopathic type things as a child, like ripping the wings off of birds and torturing small animals and that kind of behavior. And then her stepmother wanted to have her locked up or killed or whatever it took, because she could see that this little girl was going to turn into a monster when she grew up. And then what happens though is the man hired to kill her rapes her and leaves her, and she kills him instead. And now the Witcher is stuck between this young woman who everyone thinks is a monster. She herself views herself as a monster. And this wizard who was like, I did what I had to. I thought I could save her. Now she's trying to kill me. She's only going to keep killing people because that's what she likes. Wow. And now he is stuck between who's a real monster and who isn't. And is there a right answer?
That's a lot to take in.
Right? That's the first episode.
Off to a rip-roaring start. Hey, this is our first episode. This is the Basement Crawl podcast. This week's episode is the brutality of men, and we just heard a lot of brutality in that last one about The Witcher. You said it was a video game. Why does it feel like it's a Dungeons and Dragons feel to it? And again, one of our most recurring.
It definitely has that high fantasy feel to it. There are different races of humanoid creatures. There's humans, there's dwarves, there's elves, but then at the same time, the Witcher is a monster hunter, and he goes out and he kills monsters taken from Polish folklore. And, you know, he might be walking through the woods and all of a sudden there's like a spider with a human face that he's got to kill now.
Okay. Polish folklore. I thought we would never talk about Polish folklore in this podcast.
I don't know much, but the author is Polish, and he pulled in a lot of Polish myths to build his world.
That's interesting. It's funny you mentioned there's racism towards elves. As you know, I played Dungeons and Dragons, and I just wanted to point out that my character is half elvish. Not Elvis, but half elvish and half human.
Half Elvis.
So where would my character fall in this world of The Witcher? I mean, is he safe? Is he not safe? Is he still persecuted?
So I don't know, because I just started reading the first book in a series. From what I understand, just kind of wikiing all of this, is that elves, in a bid to survive, have been mating with humans. So there's some prejudice, but there's less prejudice against half elves than there is full elves.
Oh, okay. So it's just like the real world.
Yeah. And it does actually, the racism against elves, I don't know if anyone here plays the Dragon Age games at all. But they also have a similar setup where elves are treated as second-class citizens, and they are given the racist term of knife ears. He's dead.
Oh my god!
I killed Willie.
That's funny. Knife ears. Wow.
Yep.
Wow. I don't know what to say to that. I wow. Okay.
So, your little elvish character would be a knife ear, I guess.
Yeah. Wow.
A half knife ear?
Half
maybe?
knife ear, something like that, yeah.
Half knife ear.
All right, let's finish up. The last thing we wanted to talk about is this movie my wife and I just recently watched. It's from 1999, directed by Tim Roth. I figured, well, we're talking about all these serial killers, all these murderers, all these... Apparently, I started out a political debate in the chat right now.
You really did.
Oops.
Good show in our first time around. God.
Yeah. I thought this was a podcast about pop culture, not a freaking political course.
These two douchebags talking about dictators in a pop culture podcast.
Stop talking dictators and talk more dicks. All right.
Okay.
Wait, I got one. Stop talking dictators and talk more Dick's Sporting Goods. Anyway.
No, you ruined it.
Thank you.
I had a comment about dicks locked and loaded, but it's wasted now.
Stop. Vince Mercadetti's dick can only get so hard at this point. Yeah. Oh, apparently the books are good. I don't know. Someone posted. I don't know.
I'm enjoying the books. I can definitely see the difference, but I can also see where they pulled inspiration from the books. And from what I understand, the showrunner, she's working really closely with the author of the book.
And the comment.
So that's kind of cool.
I was going to say the comment was from my buddy Xavier, who apparently there's a lot of differences between the books and the show, but I still enjoy the show. So. And now they're tagging Vince too. I
loved the show. Honestly, I was like, this is going to suck. But I watched it because my husband was like, let's watch The Witcher. And I'm like, oh my God, let's binge watch this motherfucker.
And as if this podcast episode couldn't get any lower than it already is, we're going to talk about this movie called The War Zone, which nobody, I think, Colin Farrell is like the one actor people would recognize, but it's an independent film from based out of the United Kingdom, again, directed by Tim Roth. You might know Tim Roth from his appearances on Quentin Tarantino's movies like Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction.
Mr. Orange.
That's right. Good job. Every time I think about Mr. Orange, I want to go to Panda Express, really. By the way, we have a food group podcast tomorrow. Yes. What time? What?
Next podcast, erotica. I have a lot to say about that because I do freelance writing and most of it's erotica. And let me tell you the shit people want.
All right.
Talk about the brutality of man.
All right. Well, give us an example. Like, what's one of the craziest requests you've ever gotten as a writer? Let's go. Tell us about your lifestyle there.
The craziest request that I have ever received to write was a man who works for a loosely named vague science company who is shrank by a shrink ray, and then he is naked and passed around until he jizzes in his secretary's hand because all of the people are touching his tiny body. Tiny man.
Oh, Tiny Rick.
I was asked to write a sequel, and I gave him an RC car to drive around in because Tiny Man deserved better.
Oh my God. The ironic part is that Vince wanted people, like, he envisions a world where people are listening to this podcast at work. It's not safe for work, people.
It's not safe for work. So, I got one more thing to say about Tiny Man. So when I first received the request, I used to be on Fiverr and people could just like hire me out without asking if I was free. And so this person just like put in an order and I was like, son of a bitch, I have to write this. And I'm reading it. I'm like, shrink ray, I'm in. And then I didn't even finish reading it. And when I went back to start working on it, I read the end and I was like, oh my God, this is so much better than I ever thought it would be.
Yeah, I'm surprised this is a very Seinfeld heavy group. I'm surprised there was no mention of George Costanza's shrinkage problems right now. Maybe their guy was in the pool. I don't know.
Oh, you guys want a permanent segment of my erotic stories? Oh man, I got more on the way, so.
Yeah, well, feel free to share them on the Pop Culture Life group brought to you by the Life Group people. I don't know what to say.
I'll share one every time.
Did you see that?
Yep, I'm watching it. They're all about it.
Bedtime stories with Katie Roman.
Next time we do Basement Crawl, I'll share another fucked up one I've had to do.
Well, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, it can actually get worse as I try to talk about this Tim Roth movie called The War Zone.
Nobody wants to hear about Tim Roth. They want to hear about Tiny Man.
Yeah. Should we just finish it like that?
Tiny Man. No, it's okay.
Go
ahead.
Well, in this movie, it's about an English family that moves out of the city and into the country. No explanation as to why. Has to be for some business purposes or whatnot. They don't really explain that aspect. But the one thing that is running prevalent throughout the show is that there's something eerily, creepily mysterious going on in this house of 5 people. There's a man and his wife and his 3 kids. I guess the oldest is this daughter who might be, 19, 20 years old, and there's a 15-year-old son, and there's a newborn.
She's 18.
She's 18? Okay.
I read the Wikipedia page because I was like, I better find out what this is about, and it was not what I thought it was about.
Well, we eventually find out what's going on, as this movie is all about incest. I'll just go out and say it's about incest. It's not a tiny shrinking guy, but it's just as bad, I guess. So yeah, apparently this man has been having sex with his daughter for a long time, and that's what my wife and I watched over the holidays. Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy New Year. We're watching a movie about incest.
Yeah.
It gets worse.
Oh, it gets way worse.
By the way, this gained a lot of independent movie awards, to our surprise. Yeah. The actress who played the oldest daughter, she was given an award for most promising actress. I don't recognize her from anywhere else but this movie. Even in her Wikipedia page says she's most known for her role in The War Zone. So that should tell you all you need to know about her acting.
Tilda Swinton's in it too, I believe. She's the mom.
I don't know what that is, but what is that?
You don't know? You don't know what a mom or Tilda Swinton is?
No, who's Tilda Swinton?
She was in the Chronicles of Narnia. That's the only thing I can think of. She's been in a ton of stuff.
Okay. I believe
she was the White Witch in the Chronicles of Narnia. No, that's.
I might just have to tag my wife in because she might know about that. I don't know shit about that. So.
Okay, well, you never do.
Yeah, my wife is letting me know that I'm the one who picked that movie. You're right. I did. It was recommended by a website. I thought it was good. I mean, Tim Roth, right? And now I know what Tim Roth's all about. It gets worse in this movie, though, because aside from having sex with his oldest daughter, I mentioned there's a newborn daughter as well. Might as well spoil it because it's a 20-year-old movie that either people watch or are never going to watch. Yeah, he also starts having, it's insinuated that he's having, things are happening with his baby daughter as well. And that's how the movie ends. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Brutality of man.
Men worse than beasts.
Men are worse than beasts. Ugh. Especially that guy.
Yeah, and again, it garnered a lot of independent, not a lot of nominations, I should say, a lot of independent award nominations back in 1999. It was a different time back then.
I was just looking at these comments, making fun of you mostly.
As well as they should. As well as they should. As well as they should. I think that's a good place to stop. Do you have any final thoughts?
This is going to get out of control, guys.
Any final thoughts on this episode? This topic or whatever. Go ahead. I'll cede the floor to you.
Oh, man. Can't. So the brutality of man, I think we've covered that we all suck. So cool. We're a bunch of mass murdering assholes in one capacity or another. Done. Wrapped it up.
And on that note, you've been listening to the Basement Crawl podcast with Katie Roman, and I'm your host, Felipe Malicio. Katie, give them that website one more time so they could check out your erotica stories. And
my erotica stories aren't there. You have to pay for those. No, my website is katieromanbooks.com. You can find my Golden Girls blog on there. It's called Shady Pines Ma. And if you love 80s sitcoms, go ahead and check that out.
Awesome. And then check us out. Well, why might you check us out? This podcast will be available on YouTube soon enough, but I was going to say check us out at the Pop Culture Life group, but you're already in there, aren't you? On that note, good night, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Oh, they're gone. And stop recording. They're asking if you have any murder weapons at your disposal. Yeah,
I think we're still live.
Yeah, we're still